No, I was reading an article just like yesterday about the graduation at West Point. It's written by Blake Page, who you may remember. He was the cadet who resigned from West Point.
Okay.
I think it was, I can't remember if it was earlier this year or maybe last year. And he's an atheist. He basically had been subjected to a lot of harassment for that at West Point. He went back to the West Point graduation because he has many friends there still, and discovered, much to his chagrin, that Christian privilege is still on full display. He recounted one commissioning ceremony in which the aide to the Commandant of West Point was at a commissioning ceremony in the Commandant's garden, and he was describing the qualities of this officer that he was about to swear in, and one of the descriptions that he used was that the guy was Christian. And having been an Army officer, I can't imagine why you would care what religious beliefs your officers had. You know, having a specific religious background is not an attribute I would value in an Army officer. You know, the traditional things like, you know, trustworthy, loyal, hardworking, you know, those sorts of things are something you would want in an officer, but Christian, I can't imagine what value that contributes. You know.
I was just doing a hangout yesterday with P.Z. Myers and Ed Brayton and Ophelia Benson, so a bunch of the Free Thought blogs people did sort of a streaming show of sorts, and we were just talking about military stuff, and it kind of strikes me that the military, along with some other organizations, has this sort of setup where you have to unquestioningly obey people above you in the hierarchy, right? I mean, most of the time.
Well, that's kind of a perception, but actually, you're expected to apply your own understanding of what's legal and what's appropriate.
In principle, you're supposed to be able to do that, but in practice, it's hard to tell what you can do without that might cross the line to being insubordinate. Wouldn't you say?
Well, a lot of it depends on your commander, but every command that I've been in, the commander valued vigorous debate, and so if you disagreed with a course of action, you were expected to voice your opinion. And failure to do so is considered culpable neglect and inefficiency.
Yeah. I mean, it seems to me like if you've got a good commander, then you know, you're lucky to have that situation. But if you have sort of a power-mad commander, they could be in a position where the way the organization is structured can make it hard to be capable of fighting back. I mean, you've got the same kind of situation with some bosses and between students and teachers. And when you have a situation where some people are just inherently in a position of authority over somebody, the fact that religion is a very, you know, can be a very personal thing to them, and something that's important on them to push on others can be the cause of a lot of problems.
Yeah. And there's actually, as you get more senior, you get into courses, specific courses that talk about the influence a commander can have on subordinates, and why you have to be very careful with command influence, because that sort of thing, even if you don't intend to influence your subordinates in a certain way, you can unintentionally do that just because of statements you make, or, you know, seeming to reward behavior that, you know, otherwise you wouldn't. So, I mean, it's something that I think it's inherent in any kind of military organization, that you're going to have these sorts of...
anything with sort of a rigid hierarchy, basically.
But in particular in the military, because you know, unlike civilian employer, if your civilian employer tells you to do something illegal, you can walk away, usually.
Yeah, I mean, the worst thing is that you'll be out of a job.
Right. And in the military, if your commander tells you to do something illegal and you happen to be in the middle of a war zone, you can't just walk away from that job.
Right.
You know, and so there's a lot of concern about that sort of thing. It's not something that gets overlooked in the military, and I think, like I said, there's a perception that this is what happens in the military, that you just do what you're told and you don't think about it. Mm-hmm. And in fact, the Army has spent probably 25 years trying to cultivate a situation in which officers don't just blindly follow what they do.
But I mean, if you're at a job and you don't want to do something your boss says, you know, and your perception of the power dynamics is off, you could get fired. But if you're in the military and you know, you're risking getting court-martialed, which is a whole lot worse.
Yes. Yeah, if you're going to refuse an order, you have to have a sound basis for it.
Right. Which I would expect a lot of people are not that confident in their judgment, even when they're right.
Yeah, could be. But you know, you do have people that step up and do the right thing, even at you know, even at very junior ranks. I mean, the guy that kind of brought the whole Abu Ghraib you know, scandal to light was an E4, you know, an Army E4. He's a very low-ranking guy. And, you know, he had the moral courage to say, you know what, there's just not anything that looks right about this.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I look at that and it's like, okay, there were a bunch of mid-grade and junior NCOs who got prosecuted for that. And there was a brigadier general that got taken down over that. And in between, there were lots of lieutenants and captains and majors. And I didn't hear about any of them getting prosecuted. And they had to know. And so my whole thing is like, there was a whole chain of command in here that knew about this and what happened there.
But somebody relatively low on the chain took the fall for everybody, basically.
Someone low and someone high. So they had, you know, it's like, oh, look, we fired a general. And it's like, oh, what about everybody else that knew about this, you know?
Gotcha. Also, in other news of people with authority over other people, people have been writing to us a lot this week about what Pope Francis said. The Pope came out and delivered a homily in the chapel of the Domus Santa Marta residence, saying, "The Lord redeemed all of us with the blood of Christ, all of us, not just Catholics, everyone, Father, the atheists, even the atheists, everyone. And this blood makes us the children of God of the first class." And so on, which a lot of people took to mean, hey, if you're an atheist, now you don't have to go to hell, which, you know, as atheists, we're all kind of bemused by to begin with, because we already think that if you're an atheist, you don't go to hell. So some people, for some reason, are really excited about this. When it appeared that this was what he was saying, the best thing I could think about this was that it was a great answer to Pascal's wager, because people could call in and say, you know, what if you're wrong? You'll go to hell. And I'll be like, not according to the Pope. Yeah. But actually, the Vatican came running in to do some damage control later that week, and they said, you know, that you know, His Holiness, he's a kidder.
What the Pope really meant to say was,
really, they cannot be saved. This is Thomas Rosica speaking in I don't know, I found a column somewhere with an explanatory note. He said, "They cannot be saved who, knowing the church is founded by Christ and necessary for salvation, would refuse to enter her or remain in her," which sounds dirty, but her means the church. And then he goes on to say, always keep in mind the audience and context of Pope Francis's daily homilies. He is first and foremost a seasoned pastor and preacher who has much experience in reaching people. His words are not spoken in the context of a theological faculty or academy, nor in interreligious dialogue or debate. In other words, whoops, he forgot to run it by the committee first. So, sorry, atheists, you're still going to have to just go on not believing in hell and not have that, you know, not have that fallback.
Yeah, when I read that the Pope said, "Oh, atheists aren't going to go to hell," and I'm like, oh, this is not news to us.
Right? Yes.
Hell is imaginary.
Yeah, but I mean, it turns out what the church is really saying is that atheists can all be saved because they all have the opportunity to become Catholics like the rest of you guys.
Yes.
So the salvation is still available to them.
I will not enter her.
Yeah.
Her being the Catholic Church. So.
Right. That would be physiologically difficult. Yeah.